I taught at Moi University for 3 years and later on at the University of Nairobi for 9 years. I rose from the position of assistant lecturer until I became Associate Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Nairobi. In between, I was head of Department of Public Law. I have been licensed to practice law in Kenya, but also before international courts and tribunals, including the International Criminal Court, where I still remain in the list of defense counsel. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've been consulted for many organizations, including UN agencies, regional organizations like IGAD, COMESA, African Union, East African Community, and also I am a member of a number of professional organizations, including the Academic Council for the United Nations System, the International Association on the Study of Forced Migration, the International Commission of Jurists, the East African Law Society, and the Law Society of Kenya. I submit.
Thank you. Status of compliance.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I have filed to Parliament through the clerk my compliance with the Higher Education Loans Board, my compliance with the Kenya Revenue Authority in terms of tax compliance. I also have filed my compliance with all the other statutory bodies, including EACC, as well as the clearance from a recognized credit bureau, as was guided. And therefore, I want to submit, Mr. Speaker, that I've complied with all the statutory requirements as was guided by this House.
And you have all the documents?
Yes, I do.
You'll pass them on to that sergeant next to you to give to Sarah Kyoko to have a look at?
Does that include the certificates?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
She'll compare with the copies that you sent to Parliament. I will now open the session for asking and interrogating the nominee. And I'll give the first shot to the Deputy Speaker.
Professor Kindiki, I know this is within your knowledge that the Maraga Task Force on Police Reforms identified many challenges in the National Police Service, the Kenya Prison Service, and the National Youth Service as underfunding, endemic corruption, poor handling of human capital and development. So could you highlight for us some of the police reforms that you undertook during your just ended tenure as Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Internal, National Administration? And also, if approved, what are some of the measures that you will put in place to implement some of those recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I forgot to say between 2022 and 11th July 2024, I was the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and National Administration. Mr. Speaker, in response to the question by the Deputy Speaker, I respond as follows. That the task force that was established to recommend legal, policy, institutional, and other reforms in the National Police Service and the Kenya Prison Service made far-reaching recommendations on a number of issues, including welfare issues, leadership and accountability issues, career progression and succession management in the National Police Service, and also operational capabilities equipment, and so forth. Mr. Speaker, sir, that task force recommended 221 recommendations that require administrative action. It also recommended a further 178 recommendations which require funding but do not require any changes in law or policy. The task force recommended another 177 recommendations, which may not require funding, but require legislative and policy changes. And finally, the task force recommended 23 recommendations in connection with the National Police Service, not the Kenya Prison Service. 23 of them that require consultations and concurrence with the National Security Council. We have, in the period when I have been the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, we have been able to take action on some of the recommendations that did not require legal or policy changes. For example, we've rolled out a massive police equipment modernization program, which will be rolled out in 5 years. And already, under my leadership, we were able to convince the government and the National Treasury to allocate 7 billion shillings, which has already been spent to buy air and land assets to assist officers who have been exposed to great danger, those that are helping to keep the country safe in the front line, in the fight against terror, the fight against banditry and other sophisticated organized crimes. And therefore, this equipment is already up and running, especially mine resistance, ambush protected vehicles, armored personnel carriers, personal protection equipment, and also aerial unmanned vehicles, which are commonly known as drones. And we've been able to restore the police air wing, which had collapsed. And we have some of the aircrafts which are now operational and helping us with air surveillance. And we have also hoping in the next financial year, if I am approved by this House, we'll be able to purchase additional gunship helicopters to help us finish the remaining work in terms of the fight against terror, the fight against banditry and other organized crimes. Mr. Speaker, I also need to point out that because of the grave issues around leadership and succession management and career progression in the National Police Service, during my 21 months as the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, we've been able to put in place, operationalize the National Police Leadership Academy, which we opened, His Excellency the President opened in Ngong. And this is the academy that is helping us put together a curriculum that will help us put in place short courses, professional courses to retool, reskill our police officers, especially those that are in leadership, and also provide a fast-track process of identifying, nurturing leadership among our police officers. And therefore, going forward, with the academy now operational, we believe that in the next few years, we're going to inculcate not only fast succession management and career progression program, but also we're going to have a very motivated leadership within our police officers. We have also, of course, taken action around welfare issues. Already the increments for the first increments that were proposed by the task force have already been put in place. We have also, in terms of giving motivation to our officers, also operationalized the National Police Service Hospital, which is supposed to take care of those who are injured in the front line so that they are not exposed to health or even subsequent risks when they visit ordinary hospitals. So by and large, that's what we've done. And finally, on the proposals that require legislative reforms and policy reforms, we have formulated about 6 pieces of legislation which are ready. They are just waiting for stakeholder participation, and then they'll be conveyed to Parliament through Cabinet. And if I can highlight this as I end that response, Mr. Speaker, they include, number 1, the National Police Service Amendment Bill 2024, the National Police Service Commission Amendment Bill 2024, the National Forensic Laboratory Services Bill 2024. We have also formulated a bill which will also assist us in the leadership and the command oversight in the National Police Service. I submit.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question to the CS nominee relates to just where he stopped on the legal and legislative proposals that he was considering before his exit from the ministry, and more so around the issue of implementation of Article 37 of the Constitution on the right of Kenyans to picket, assemble, demonstrate peaceably. And CS, you have seen in the recent past a lot of confrontations between members of the public and the police. And it's my view that principally why this has been so is because you have failed to designate picketing corners. And Kenyans imagine you can picket anywhere and everywhere, including in some areas that you consider restricted areas. I would want to hear what is it that you would intend to do if you are reappointed and approved by this committee to ensure that there are no more confrontations between members of the public who want to peaceably assemble and picket and the police. 2, there seems to have been a complete breakdown in administrative and security structures in the country. And I say that in view of when you came into office, the Shakahola massacre, where up to now we don't know how many Kenyans lost their lives in Shakahola. We have seen in the recent past Kware here in Nairobi. In a country like ours, how is it possible where you have chiefs, assistant chiefs, nyumba kumi, and all the structures and security and administrative structures that we have, that 20, 40 people can be killed around one small area like Kware, in the full view of the security and administrative structures without government coming to know. And the same thing happened to Shakahola. And I would want to hear what is it that you would intend to do to make sure that there is restoration of administrative and security structures right at the village level to secure our country.
Mr. Speaker, sir, it is true there is work that requires to be done to ensure that the people of Kenya enjoy their constitutional right and freedom to assemble, picket, and demonstrate, and present petitions to public authorities, while at the same time maintaining public order and also ensuring the rights of other people. before I was dismissed on 11th of July, I had actually finalized the draft regulations to the Public Order Act, which will be the statutory instrument to be processed for purposes of giving effect to the enjoyment of that right, not to curtail that right, because a statute cannot curtail a constitutional right, but to give effect to how that right will be exercised. Those draft regulations, when completed, will be able to help the police do a number of things. Number one, obligate the police to escort protesters and provide security for them, but also to ensure protesters don't run amok and overrun members of the public who are not protesting. Number three, it will require those protesting to notify the police and tell, and also give the number of protesters so that the appropriate arrangements are made. It will also obligate public institutions in all arms of government, all public institutions, to designate an area within their premises or within the vicinity of their premises where a group of protesters who want to present petitions can stand, demonstrate, and present petitions to that public office or that public institution. Those regulations also will of course ask protesters to also be responsible for their own conduct, and therefore we hope that if I am approved, this is a low-hanging matter. It's something that we can process in the shortest time possible to avoid a situation like what we've had in the past 1 month of protests which are unmanaged and which have exposed us to deaths and destruction of property and a lot of inconvenience to the people of Kenya. On the second question by the leader of the majority party, it is true that we have experienced a number of security incidents that should not have happened in the first place. And let me say that first and foremost, the Shakahola incident didn't happen when it became public. It happened over quite a number of years, and it's an indictment actually on our ability as a country to be able to prevent some of these sophisticated crimes from hurting our people. I am on record to having apologized on behalf of previous and the present administration for that breach, because the radicalization and the criminal activity around Shakahola began in 2019-2020. But the manifestation in terms of people dying and being buried was something that happened sometimes in 2022. And the Shakahola incidents will remain the most tragic security breach in the history of our country. We have never had a security breach of that magnitude in our country. We have learned the lessons. 2 days ago, the task force that the president had appointed has helped to give us some of the recommendations on what we need to do to avoid that going forward. But also, we believe that the public officials, including security officers who are in charge, must also have their day in being made accountable. We had proposed the establishment of a commission of inquiry to help us put together the accountability process so that we can have recommendations on prosecution and other action, but the Commission of Inquiry was stopped by our courts, and we were unable to move. But with or without the Commission of Inquiry, I want to assure the people of Kenya, if I am approved, one of my priorities will be to make sure that the accountability for the crimes in Shakahola by public officials, including security managers of all arms, of all agencies of the state, must proceed as a way of making sure that we do not have this kind of thing happening again. It is true also recently we had an incident which is actively under investigations around Kware area. Again, the same reasons, gaps in the Ngao and Nyumba Kumi structures, and also our intelligence collection ability. And I just want to say that now that we have finalized the proposals and we know what we need to do to reform our National Police Service, my next assignment, if I am approved by this House, will be to initiate far-reaching reforms in the national government administration system to ensure that we restructure the Ngao system, make it more responsive, modernize it, and distribute it to the lowest level in a manner which helps us to avoid incidents like this when we have serious security breaches, yet we have government officials paid by the people of